Hey, welcome into another edition of the Rice Football Blue and Gray preview show. I'm joined here, as always, with JP Heath, voice of the Rice Owls. I'm Matthew Bartlett, director and managing editor at the Roost. And for the first time this season, we're going to briefly, not dwell on the past, but we're going to talk a little bit about a Rice Owls victory, huh?
Hey, we'll spend the whole show, right? No. The nature of these things is to look forward, but it is refreshing to have some positive vibes coming into a game week and to some extent a preview show. But it's a better feeling. Everything tastes better, to quote the boss man. The sun is brighter, the spouse looks better, all that good stuff. So I can't wait to get conference play here finally.
Yeah, and I think it's germane a little bit for us to talk a little bit about the Texas Southern game. Of course, you mentioned we're going to be looking ahead, previewing Southern Miss. I like how we went Texas, Texas Southern, Southern Miss. Got that whole string
Yeah.
together. If they would have put it flip flopped, it would not have jived as well phonetically. So thank
Or
you
if we
for.
got Ole Miss, somehow got Ole Miss in a random mid or beginning of conference game to play, that then it'd been perfect. That's the only other transitive property I could have seen. Anyway,
We'll get there. I don't
yeah,
think Ole Miss is on the schedule yet.
no, not yet.
Not yet. We're not saying anything. We have no idea. We just sit here and talk, right, JP? But
Yes.
But to that end, we do need to talk a little bit about the Texas Southern game because I think as we kind of look forward, obviously last week we talked about how a win was paramount and of most importance. They got that. But as we kind of look forward and break down how Rice is going to stack up against Southern Miss, I think naturally it all comes down to quarterback. As you know, Coach Bloomgren likes to say, too much credit and too much blame. But it's going to be pivotal for Rice going forward into conference play. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks like after a wild non-conference slate that Rice might have a quarterback or some sort of plan at quarterback that is going to work.
Yeah, or at the very least, some sort of system, if that's even the correct term there. The sprinkling in of Luke as the side dish, so to speak. But I hesitate even to say that. But you just said it, JP. So why'd you say it? But like the main course was Jake, and you saw him really 70% of the time. But then Luke would turn on a dime, and he would come in there from Coach Tui's instruction, and just it worked perfectly. Now, does that formula spell out every week? Does it work every week? I hope so, because conference play, it's the whole season's in front of us, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a little bit. But that mixture was perfect, and the way they started, the tone of the game was bam, and it worked, and that proved to be the theme of the night. They had their most explosive plays. They had their best rushing game that's improved, and it all started. Things look a lot easier when you get that quarterback situation figured out, and I think they at least took one huge step forward to doing that on Saturday. And let's see if it carries through conference play.
Yeah, I mean just call the touchdown play, right? It's that easy. Start with that and just keep calling that.
I like that play in the book. When it works, it works dandy, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, and we joke, but I think it's interesting. I was kind of looking back at Jake Constantine and kind of his trajectory here. Was going to ask him about his previous stops and journey along the way. I didn't realize this. Guy has not lost a regular season home game as a collegiate quarterback, and this is his fourth year as a starter.
Wow.
The Southern Miss game is at home, JP. We can't mess with history.
I know this, and I'm thankful for that. Although I don't mind going to Hattiesburg, but it, especially with last year's game, fresh on the mind. Yeah, Coach Tuiasosopo told me after practice last week that Jake has fought at every step to play this game, and you can see that in him. He's decisive. He's accurate, which you love your quarterbacks to be, and that is not just the nature of the routes, but I mean he can spin it and throw it on a dime. Maybe at least in my frame of reference, not up to Mike Collins yet in the small sample size, but this week will be the third game that he'll play. So maybe that's the equitable sample size, because we only saw Mike 3 games of last week, but that's about as high quarterback play as far as accuracy as I've seen in my decade or so here. But Yeah, he is. He's the total package as far as having the experience, having the just being a man, and also having that accuracy that you want to see. And the style fits really nicely into Tui's West Coast scheme because, hey, newsflash, you have to be accurate in the scheme. And I think when you pair that with the running game, you see how that running game gets better when you're accurate early, when you're explosive early, then you can settle down. And on the defensive side too, when you can rush the passer with that lead, that you gave up some yards, but you still everything works together. And that started with some really good quarterback play. Maybe not the best game we'll see from him, but still, I'll take that type of Jake Constantine effort every week.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned the accuracy. I thought it was interesting. The best in terms of completion percentage game from a Rice quarterback came from Tom Stewart. He went 18 of 23 in one outing. Jake was actually 18 of 21 in this game before the fourth quarter, and he only attempted 2 passes in the fourth quarter, and those were both incompletions when they were kind of salting the game away. So for the better part of this game, Jake was actually throwing the most efficient game a Rice quarterback has had, at least under Mike Bloomgren. And I asked Bloomgren about that afterwards. I said, where does this stack up? You've had a lot of quarterbacks come in and sling it around over your tenure here. And he pointed it to Mike Collins. He said what Mike did, because Mike had 10 touchdowns to 1 interception. So Jake needs to throw 9 more touchdowns without a pick to get there. Would love to see it. Could start this weekend, but that's kind of, if that's the standard, that puts Jake probably coming in one game, and it is one game. We got to stress that, but at least in the better half of the quarterback performances we've seen, and I think that as we transition maybe forward a little bit into Southern Miss, I particularly think that's interesting because you have, if we're gonna compare the Rice offense to the Southern Miss defense, you have a defense that is susceptible to a good quarterback or any quarterback who can deliver the ball accurately down the field. Kind of setting the stage, Southern Miss is not quite the same team that we saw last year. A lot of similar parts, but you got a new head coach, you got a new quarterback that's come in, and you got a lot of different faces on the coaching staff and among the players. So what is your quick, high-arching overview of what the 2021 Southern Miss team looks like that Rice is going to face it at Rice Stadium on Saturday?
First off, we're in starting now, the 9th minute, and we've got to mention Jordan Myers, a $160 career high performance in carries, yards, and touchdowns. I know you got to that on your pod, but
hey, and I will say, I ran into you in the press box before the game, and I said, how crazy is it that Jordan Myers is about to have a 20 carry game?
Yeah, that's
you
right.
Remember that? I was off by 6. He had 26.
Yeah,
his career high before this was like 14.
Yeah, and it proved that when that works, they're going to keep going to that well. And we didn't see as much as of Kalen Griffin, but we saw a lot of him. He got his first career touchdown. And then you saw when Ari Broussard got his touches, he had, 3 or 4 carries, but he ran with his pants on fire. So
Cam Montgomery getting mixed in. I think he had 6 or 7 touches.
Yeah, and the team yards per carry is right at 4.5, and the top 3 of the top 4 of the top 5 rushers are averaging right around 5 yards per carry, give or take a decimal point. So credit Sanders Davis, credit Coach Bloomgren, and obviously Coach Tui in there for the improvement of the offensive line play, because my schnauzer is digging into the carpet right by me. But it's his 12th birthday today. He can do what he wants, if you wonder what that scratching is. But how the Rice running game figures in against Southern Miss, plain and simple, it's going to be tough sledding this week. And this will be – but they've seen Texas. They've seen Arkansas. They saw a very good U of H defensive front. So, this is top 20 run defense in the nation for Southern Miss. And as far as on paper, at least what they released, they play a 3-4. We know everything's different. But they've got some big fellas in the middle. Tosh Sykes over the ball. He'll be a tough one if it's still going to be the same offensive setup that we saw this past week on the interior of the offensive line. But Braden Nutter deserves some kudos, so he'll have a lot to go against. But one of the top run defenses in the nation, and this will be another not an easy test to try to run the football, but I think the guys are up for the challenge.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and I was trying to kind of sort this through as I was prepping because if you take out the Alabama game, and I know you like, if you take out this, then the rest, like, but let's be real, like Alabama just runs headlong through anybody. Like they make the best teams in the country look silly. So it's maybe not even the same sport that the rest of us are playing. But if you set aside the Alabama game, the Southern Miss defense has allowed 1.5 yards per carry in their first three contests, which would be second nationally to Wisconsin out of 130 whatever there are FBS teams, which is pretty good. And I've been kind of mulling through this because you mentioned Sykes. They got a couple of guys in the front seven that are proven. I think Central Latham at the linebacker spot has kind of been a veteran leader for them. Feels like forever now. I guess only a couple of years at this point. But I guess my question is, are they, an elite run defense, or are they particularly susceptible through the air to the point where South Alabama and Troy didn't have to run the football? And I think that's going to be an interesting thing to monitor, because if you have a defense that is susceptible to through the air, and we just talked about Jake Constantine and the emerging of the Rice passing game, this could sneakily be a better matchup for Rice than it might look like on paper.
Yes. We've been doing these together now. This is our fifth one of these symbiotic relationship, because I was thinking that same thing, the last few things you said. You have to, and everybody listening here, look up deep into my eyes, you have to consider the comparison of the schedules. This is when, while it's not always my favorite moments to have that really tough schedule early on in a season like that, this is when it really pays off, because they lost to South Alabama 31-7. Jags aren't exactly the behemoths of the Sun Belt Conference.
They fired a coach for a more respectable result last year.
Yes,
against the same team.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess he resigned, but
they shut out Grambling, and then they lost to Troy, and then they lost Alabama. But you don't hold that against them for trying to compare it, because, like you said, Alabama is almost literally playing a different sport than anyone else. So.
Arkansas is a top 10 team right now. You could have the same conversation with the Owls.
Get out of my head, young Bartlett, because you cannot compare the two schedules. And in that, like I said a question or two ago, Rice has improved each of the 3 weeks running the football. So, again, I don't like hot take guy. I don't want people trying to take any snippets of this as me making any bold predictions. I am not doing that. But when you look at the trajectory to see where Rice has done the last few weeks, it's odd to be this confident at 1-3. But I feel a lot better than I would have had talking to you this time a week or two ago, because of the schedules that have stacked up, comparing that against the two. Might not be fair. It might not be fair, but just looking at it side by side, you can't compare the two.
No, I don't think so. And this it's interesting, because football is a game that you put all the box scores together and then you go out and play it, right? And it's never quite exactly how you feel. I think right. And so far, if we look at the Texas Southern game, you could just feel that something was different when that first play touchdown to said Patterson. If you go back a year ago and you look at this Southern Miss game that Rice played, it was Austin Trammell, the sheriff out there with the Falcons right now, with that big, he had a couple big plays in this game, but kind of busting things open. And that's the point where you can force. It's kind of like Rice. Rice is not a team that nobody wants to play from behind. But how this offense works and trying to ground and pound, it's a lot easier when you're level-ish to get there. Southern Miss, a true freshman quarterback, and we have Frank Gore Jr., which we'll touch on, talented running back, but not really anybody. I mean, Jason Brownlee, maybe, probably the most experienced guy, but not really any individual person in as far as the receiving core that scares you. So the ability to start fast, that's what I'm interested when you kind of play this game out in your head. How do you make this game a repeat of last year's Southern Miss game, and I think that might be it. And it might come down to maybe they drop the same play, call a touchdown play again against that Southern Miss defense, and kind of put the pressure on a freshman quarterback making, I guess, his third career start. Have you seen anything? What do we know about Ty Keys if we're going to flip over to the other side of the ball and Southern Miss, the offense side?
I learned that obviously fantastic athlete. He was Mr. Football in the state of Mississippi, and the Ty, Coach Bloomgren was telling me on his on our broadcast on Monday nights, the Mike Bloomgren show. Hey, we had to reach far for that title, but he actually knew the quarterback that got injured. Was it Lowe that got injured? Because he coached with him on the Alabama staff years ago. So he'd known Lowe since he was 1 year old. So it doesn't look like he'll play in this one, but Keys, he's dynamic. He's a playmaker. I mean, he's not the exact quarterback that we saw from Body last week, who I was listening back to the broadcast, and we were talking about the halftime stats and the football geniuses that we are. Nate was saying, hey, if they start completing passes, it's going to get interesting. And lo and behold, they start completing passes. So I don't think they're going to gun it and sling it around as much as Texas Southern was trying to do and was unfortunately successful at times. And I guess this is our segment to kind of kick the can around about Southern Miss offense versus the Rice defense. The Owls defense has to step up. I mean, I know they know this, but too much stuff has gone over the top. And I don't know what has to be done to remedy that, but I think it starts with that pressure and that coverage to get a little more pressure on the quarterback. That'll help against Keys, but he's a guy that can be pressed out and that can do some damage too. So I don't think, again, not about guarantees or just generic hot takes, but Owls have to step up defensively, and that starts with getting some pressure on Keys. But Gore, he's a man. He's a grown man. He's 19. To paraphrase the old anniversary of the Mike Gundy quote, I read a lengthy article on Sports Illustrated comparing the two and how, I mean. Mike
Gundy and Gore?
Yes. Yeah. Did I say someone else?
You just said comparing the two. I was giving you a hard time.
I'm a man. I'm 19. I'm a man. I'm 40. But Gore's good. And he didn't get out of the garage so much last season, but he's that home run type of back, and he's a fire hydrant. He's tough to bring down, and the Owls have their work cut out for them. And on their side, it'll start with getting to Keys, but also containing Gore to not let him out of the garage early in the game.
Yeah, and it all comes down to Gore, and I think it's interesting. You mentioned last year was kind of subdued. That'll happen when you fall behind early, and that was early in the season, so it was only they had a couple other guys. He'd only played in a couple collegiate games to that point. I think he might have been just named the starter at that point in the season. It was pretty early, but I think it was interesting. Pro Football Focused named Gore graded Gore rather as their third highest graded freshman in the country last year. So obviously everybody knows his dad. They know the pedigree, but he came in, and I think we saw, maybe some freshman irks of, ball security and knowing where he was supposed to go and what to line up. But when you just hand him the football and put it in his gut and go, he can be dangerous. And those home run plays, we saw it against Texas. You got to avoid that, because all of a sudden the best defense you play, it becomes a lot more suspect when the other team can hit a 40-yarder, and then they only need 2 first downs to get to the end zone instead of 6 or 7. So I think that's going to be interesting. And it's going to be interesting because if Rice can limit or slow down Gore, then it is their best offensive weapon. And you're going to force Keys, who a young guy, and take Alabama aside, didn't look incredible against Alabama, but looked kind of shaky, had some balls that probably should have been picked and weren't against Troy. A secondary that, is looking for some redemption. Maybe after the Texas Southern game, you can force mistakes and get to turnovers. And I think that's going to be really pivotal in this game, as it is in every game. But that's a part where I think Rice has the potential to take advantage. We talked with Akina Inachuku this Tuesday. My days, I don't know what day it is. I thought COVID was gonna give me a break from that, but it hasn't. They're all the
Time
same.
is a myth, yeah.
It's game day and not game day, right? Is that how we tell time
Yeah.
in the fall, at least? But Akina was talking with us earlier this week about his kind of vision for the front four and taking that next step. And I think that's going to be a crucial piece because if Rice can get pressure, and I think that's something that we didn't see against Texas Southern, we saw pressure, but let the quarterback roll out and kind of get creative. No creative from Keys on Saturday. Force him to stand in the pocket and make throws. And that's something that, everybody can have a great game, but we haven't seen it yet from him as a collegiate passer to that degree.
Yeah, and he's still really young. You just don't want it to be his coming out party like it was for Body last week for Texas Southern. And it's Captain Obvious, as I'm sure you're going to segue here in a little bit. But if Rice can run the ball and stop, have some third down conversions. They've really struggled on third downs. They've only converted about a third of them on the season. That makes the defense look a lot better. Folks can read between the lines, but my pro football team rooting of choice, they've proven that with their bad defense, it's gotten better in some scheme things, but also because they keep the defense off the field with more running the football. It's football 101. So if the Owls could do something like 33, 34 minutes time of possession, that would make me feel happy. Southern Miss going a little more tempo, that could kind of help into that, but just keeping the defense off the field. I don't mean that as an insult. It's just football logic. What I've seen that's really worked over the years here on South Main is having that complementary style, and out of their own control, they couldn't do that the first three games because of the lofty schedule that was put in front of them. But hopefully now, once the things start to even out in conference play, run the football a lot better, and that atones for some things on the defense to give them a breather, just to take a deep breath. And I think that helps a lot of things too. But anyway, I started chasing a squirrel, and go ahead.
No, I think it's fair, and it's a good point. And I think a lot of it comes down to, we're talking about third downs. That's something that is an execution thing. And one more thing that I don't think either of us have touched on yet, whether it be on this show, podcast, or whatever, something that's kind of flown under the radar with this team that I've kind of thought was interesting is over the past 3 years, this has been a team that has been, from a discipline perspective, remarkably sound. There have just not been many penalties, not a lot of shooting themselves in the foot, being effective and going from there. Rice so far through 4 games has had 29 penalties accepted, which is a little over, what do you call that? Seven a game, which that's a lot. They had 29 penalties accepted last year in 5 games. So you're already subtracting a game and you're at the same number. Or rather, am I getting my numbers confused? I got to click.
No, you're right.
The right link. No, I want to make sure I'm talking truths. 17 penalties last year. So there you go. 17 and 5. What is it? Tripling the penalties you've had so far, and this has been a team that historically has averaged 3 or 4 maybe penalties a game. They've been in the top 5 in the nation and least penalties allowed, and that's been something that we saw it a lot against Texas Southern. We saw it against Houston. Just a lot of just mental errors, and that's something that Southern Miss entering this game, they're averaging somewhere around 6.5. Almost 7 penalties a game as well. So you're talking about 2 teams that have not done particularly well on third down. Southern Miss is converting somewhere around 35-40% on the lower end. So better, but not where you want to be, and committing penalties. And these 2 games, or these 2 teams, are probably close enough, whether or not either side wants to admit it, that if you have a bad day on third down and you commit a lot of penalties, you can find yourself in a very, very tough place. Am I oversimplifying it? But it kind of feels like Rice is at a point where we have the offensive question answered last week. They can do it. We need to see, and we've seen several years of a track record on defense with Brian Smith being able to flip that switch and shut things down. Now we got to see them play a fundamentally sound football game for 4 quarters and 3 phases. Which, as I list the things out, it's starting to sound like a big ask. Is it too big of an ask?
Well, this is a great topic because Nate and I got into it. I love the guy, but on air and off, and I'll save the off-air stuff and charge premium content to make a little bit of scratch. But I said, look, on air, I said, in a matter of words, you're not going to have the perfect game. I think some people watching, clicking in right now, forgive my brutal honesty here, some people are complaining that you only beat an FCS team by 14 points. What do you want? You got a win, and that was what you needed. You saw great performances from the running game, from the quarterback. You might have an answer there. So that's where I kind of playfully slapped Nate's hand, figuratively, but not harm the guy. I love him. But look, there are still a lot of things. I can't argue that there are a lot of things to improve, but they got the win. Now they look to get another. The whole season is in front of them. They can still win a Conference USA championship. They've got their goals ahead of them. So they've got to correct some things. I think getting better first and second down plays, in case in point, to reference the Texas Southern game again, they were up. Rice was up, was it 17-0? They had a big margin. They're up 17-0, and they're 0 for 2 on third downs. That's kind of an anomaly. But I would like to see them. That's not going to happen every game because they had such big first and second down plays, and they had so many explosive plays. That's where that figures in there. What I would love to see is a 3rd down and 3, a 3rd down and 4. Make it much more manageable because you and I both know we've seen every snap this season too many times this year. 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, 3rd and 11. And on the other side, I'm not allowed to bet for my job, and I would never do it. Anyway, I'm not going to bet anyway. But the amount of times we have seen, and this was true for Texas Southern a couple times, a lot against Houston, Arkansas, and not really so much Texas. I've blocked that out from my memory. But the amount of times the other team converts 3rd and 11 and Dell for U of H or Davis last week for Texas Southern, they're right at the chains and they complete those long first downs. That drives me mad. So Rice has to set them up way ahead of the chains and prevent the other team from completing those great play calls, but they complete the long third downs. That's another one I had to feel like you're my counselor. I'm getting things off my chest, but just had to say that because be happy with a win, but also build on that. And there are still some things you can improve on going here to conference play, going into the off week too. Then we'll talk about UTSA down the road, but that just had to vent. Had to tell my feelings there.
I think Take Dell just converted another 3rd and 14. Like as we said, it kind of felt like that. And as we kind of circle the wagons here, to use a Southern term because we are playing Southern Miss, but we've gotten through the first 3 games in particular of the schedule, particularly the 2 teams that are, what is Texas now, 15? Are they top 20 teams, something like that still?
Who cares, Matthew?
Yeah, whatever they are. Well, I think it's relevant because in those games, we said you can execute to a T and you can still get beat because they got the athletes that you don't have. But we're entering the portion of the schedule where that's not going to be the case. Some teams are going to have positional advantages on one side of the ball or the other in a particular game, but nobody Rice is playing the rest of the way is going to be night and day better than them. Or night and day worse, if we're going to be honest. It's and I think I've said this quote several times, maybe to you, but I'll never forget a Skip Holtz quote that he said. He told us in a scrum at Media Days a couple years ago. He said, "Conference USA is a lot like NASCAR. Everybody's got the same engine. It's just who drives it better on any particular day." And I think that's kind of, as we close in here, I think that's important to note that Rice is at the point of the schedule where if they execute and they play their game, they should be able to see favorable results. And if they don't, it's going to be on them. Like, there's no Bijan Robinsons hiding around the corner that are just going to be like, well, that guy's a top 10 draft pick. What are you going to do? Like, there might be some high picks, but Rice is the point where they kind of control their own destiny. And what better place to start than a home game against a Southern Miss team that, also 1-3, and the world is your oyster, right? It's all in front of you.
Yeah, that's what I love. It's like a rebirth, and this was only the fourth time I was reading Chuck's notes that this has happened in the Conference USA era. So about one every Olympiad, you get this where you have all your non-conference games behind you, and just to land the plane even farther, I'm not seeing Texas ranked. I thought they were, but coaches poll, ESPN AP poll, I'm seeing them just on the fringe, but top 25-ish. But they'll be there. If they beat the Horned Frogs this weekend.
Yeah, better watch out for flags being planted. We'll see.
Yes. Parodies of country songs.
Right. What else? I've enjoyed this. Make sure everybody remembers where they're looking to find you on Saturday, can kind of watch you in the booth and go about your business.
On your uncle and grandpa's favorite social media platform. We're on Facebook, on Skateboard Man YouTube's platform. We're on YouTube, Facebook, in the booth, the Rice House Game Day app, obviously, ricehouse.com, the Varsity Network app as well. Thank you.
Everywhere, man. Everywhere. And if this was not enough for you and you need more, go ahead, swing by the website this week, patreon.com/@theroost. We got more practice updates. Yeah, whichever side of the screen I'm on, coming towards you. And we didn't touch on this a little bit. We might get Trayshawn Chamberlain back. Shh.
Okay.
Maybe. We'll see. I'm optimistic. But get all your fill everything inside right there. Man, we got a lot going on. We're going to be halfway through the season. Starting soon. I can't even believe that. Well, are we doing by math, doing by, whatever it is?
Yeah.
I was told there'd be no math. We'll save that for next week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Save the act jokes, all that.
Yeah. There you go. So that'll wrap us up. We will be back next week. Or what are we doing? Do we know what we're doing next week? There's a bye game. We want to preview the bye game?
Week off.
You got any good vacation plans?
I want to go to Galveston. I'd like to.
It's been a while. Go get a hamburger at the Spot.
Yeah, I love the Spot. Bruchaco's Tacos, favorite taco place down there. That's where my soul gets refreshed going down to Galveston. Love water. Love water.
This is good. You guys, we went an extra 3 minutes today just to give you some Galveston food recs. So now you have something to do for the bye week. So
you get paid overtime for this.
Right? And that's all we got. We will wrap up. We will let you go. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening. We'll be back around, and we'll have another game to preview soon enough. So thank y'all. Rice fight.
Never dies.